There are two kinds of mothers in the world. The ones who love you loudly, in front of everyone, and mean every word of it. And the ones who love you loudly in front of everyone, and spend the quiet hours trying to make sure no one else ever loves you back. My name is Camille Okafor. I am 34 years old. I am a physical therapist and a single mother and a woman who spent 3 years giving her mother weekly access to her children because I believed, in the particular stubborn way that daughters believe things about their mothers, that Sandra Okafor was trying. I found out on a Tuesday that she had been telling my 8-year-old daughter Nina that I didn't really love her. Not once. Not in a moment of frustrated cruelty. Weekly. For 9 weeks. Every Wednesday sleepover at Grandma's house. My mother had been quietly, methodically, tenderly working to make my daughter doubt me. My mother left for the shore that Friday with Nina and my son Eli. They were gone 4 days. I used every one of them. By the time they came back, I was already somewhere else. Let me tell you about my mother before I tell you what she did, because I have learned the hard way that people who hear a story like mine will always ask, but what were the warning signs? And I want to be honest with them. The warning signs were everywhere. I just thought I knew what they meant. Sandra Okafor is 61 years old, and she is, by any external measure, a devoted grandmother. She shows up. She brings food. She knows which stuffed animal Nina sleeps with and which flavor of juice box Eli will drink and which. She learned the names of every child in Nina's class by the end of 2nd grade. She came to every school play, every church program, every single birthday, and she always arrived with the exact right gift and the exact right expression of pride, and she made the other grandmothers in the room look distracted. I used to think this was love. I used to think, when I was exhausted from a 12-hour shift at the clinic and my mother appeared at my door with dinner already cooked, that this was what having a good mother looked like. I thought I had finally, after a difficult childhood and a harder divorce, landed somewhere safe. My mother's fear, and I understand this now, though it took me a long time to get there, is that she will become unnecessary. Her whole life, she has organized herself around being needed. Her husband needed her until he didn't, and they divorced. Her church needed her until a younger woman joined the congregation and took over the committees. Her children needed her until her son Marcus moved to Portland and her daughter Camille got stable on her own feet and stopped calling in crisis. What my mother does when she feels herself becoming unnecessary is the same thing she has done her whole life. She finds a way to create the need. She makes someone dependent on her. And the most vulnerable, most available person in my life, the one who could most easily be made to need my mother's version of love, was Nina. I want to be careful here. I am not telling you my mother is evil. I am telling you she is afraid. I think she has been afraid her whole life and that nobody ever taught her a way to handle it that did not involve making other people smaller. That is not an excuse. It is an explanation. There is a difference. The Wednesday sleepovers started 9 months after my divorce was finalized. My ex-husband, Derek, had moved to Atlanta, and I was working full-time and adjusting to being the only adult in the house, and my mother offered the sleepovers as a gift. Nina adored her. Eli was too young then to stay overnight, but Nina at 7 was old enough to pack her own little overnight bag and feel proud of herself for doing it, and she loved sleeping in her grandmother's guest room with a quilted bedspread and the nightlight shaped like a moon. I was grateful. I want you to know that. I was tired and I was lonely, and I was grateful for every Wednesday night when I could put Eli to bed early and sit in the quiet of my own kitchen and drink tea from the copper kettle and feel something close to rest. 9 weeks. For 9 weeks, while I was resting, while I was trusting, my mother was sitting beside my daughter in that guest room with the moon nightlight and telling her things about me that were not true. I found out the way I find out most things that matter. Nina told me herself. She didn't mean to. She was eating breakfast at the kitchen table on a Tuesday morning at 6:47, and she looked up from her cereal bowl and said, very quietly, in the particular tone that children use when they are testing whether a thing they have heard is real, "Mama, do you love me the way Grandma loves me?" I set down my mug. I sat across from her. I said, "What makes you ask that?" She looked at the table. She said, "Grandma says you love us, but not the same way." I kept my face very still. I said, "Grandma is wrong."
Nina looked up at me then.
I held her gaze. And then I made her a second bowl of cereal because her first had gone soggy, while I sat there rearranging my understanding of the last 9 months. I did not call my mother that morning. I did not text her. I drove Nina and Eli to school, and I drove to the clinic, and I worked a full 8-hour shift. I had 3 post-op knee replacements and 1 shoulder reconstruction, and a 72-year-old woman named Mrs. Holloway, who was learning to trust her repaired hip, and I did not think about my mother once while I was working, or rather I thought about her constantly, and set the thought on a shelf the way you set a hot pan aside when you can't deal with it yet. I called my coworker and closest friend Joelle Ravenel on my lunch break. Joelle has been a physical therapist at the same clinic for 6 years, and she is the kind of person who listens without filling in your sentences, which is the rarest and most valuable quality a person can have. I told her what Nina had said. I said it plainly. My mother has been telling my daughter she doesn't love her the same way Grandma loves her. Joelle was quiet for 4 seconds. Then she said, "How long has your mom been doing the Wednesday nights?" I said, 9 months. She said, "Camille." I said, "I know." She said, "What are you going to do?" I didn't have the answer yet. I was still in the part of the story where you hold the information and turn it over and feel its weight and try to understand what it means about everything that came before. I thought about Mrs. Holloway that morning, learning to trust her repaired hip, putting weight on it carefully, testing whether it would hold. I thought about the difference between a joint that is healed and a joint that is compromised, and how sometimes you cannot tell from the outside. When I got home, that evening I checked on Nina. She was doing homework at the kitchen table. Her purple backpack was on the chair beside her. She was fine, or she seemed fine, in the way children seem fine when they have been told something unsettling and have not yet decided what to do with it. I made dinner. I helped with the math. I put them both to bed. And then I sat down at my own kitchen table with the copper kettle going, and I called my mother. Sandra picked up on the second ring. She sounded warm. She always sounds warm. I told her what Nina had said, word for word. I did not raise my voice. I did not add editorial. I just reported what my 8-year-old daughter had told me at 6:47 in the morning while her cereal went soggy. There was a pause. Then my mother said, "Camille, I was just telling her the truth about how much I love her. I don't see why that has to be a competition." I said, "You told her I don't love her the same way." My mother sighed. She said, "You're reading too much into it. Nina knows I adore her. I'm just very present in a way that maybe you can't always be, given your schedule." I did not argue. I did not list the evidence. I did not recite the 12-hour shifts and the school pickups and the nighttime fevers and the Tuesday mornings where I sit across from my daughter while she eats cereal and I make sure she knows she is known. I did not cry. I did not confront her. I did not give her the scene she probably expected. I said, "Okay, Mom." And I hung up. 3 days later, she called to confirm the beach trip. I said the kids were packed and ready. I said nothing else. I helped them load the car. I kissed them both goodbye. I watched the car pull away. And then I went back inside, and I looked at the apartment, and I started to understand what I was going to do with 4 days and a moving truck. I had been thinking about leaving for longer than I am comfortable admitting. Not thinking clearly, not lists and timelines and rental applications, but thinking in that underground way, the way you think about something you are not ready to name yet. I had walked through my apartment over the previous weeks with a different kind of attention. I noticed which things were mine in the deep sense, the things I would need to rebuild a life around, and which things were just here filling space, neutral. I noticed that the apartment itself was not mine in the deep sense. I had moved in a year after the divorce, partly because it was close to my mother's house. That had seemed like a practical virtue. I understood now that it had been a trap I had walked into with my eyes open because I was tired and grateful, and I had mistaken proximity for safety. The Friday they left, I did not start packing. I sat with it one more day. I needed to be sure I was not reacting from the hot center of what I had heard, that I was acting from somewhere steadier, somewhere cooler. I have a therapist named Dr. Penn, and I have been seeing her for 2 years, and one thing she has helped me understand is the difference between a decision made from clarity and a decision made from injury. They can look identical from the outside. From the inside, there is a texture difference, a temperature difference, a quality in the chest that tells you which one you are in. I sat with the apartment quiet around me, and I tried to identify which one this was. By Friday night, I knew. It was clarity. Not the hot kind, not the kind that arrives with certainty and a raised voice. The cold kind. The kind that feels less like revelation and more like finally reading a sign that had been posted for a long time in a language you were only now fluent enough to understand. I called the moving company at 8:30 Friday evening. The rental came to $1,847 for a 20-foot truck over 4 days. I had the money. I had been building a small emergency fund for 8 months without fully naming what it was for, one shifted expense at a time, the kind of saving that happens when some part of you is preparing for something the rest of you has not admitted yet. The dispatcher said they could have the truck at my address by 7 Saturday morning. I said that would be fine. Then I called Joelle. "I'm moving," I said. "This weekend." She was quiet for 2 seconds. Then, "Tell me what you need." That was all I needed her to say. I told her what I needed. She showed up Saturday at 8 with coffee and a thermos and her older sister's pickup truck and the specific kind of energy that means a person has decided they are here to work and they are not going to make it about themselves. There is a particular grace in that. In the friend who shows up with their sleeves already rolled, who does not require you to perform your crisis before they help you move through it. We worked side by side for 14 hours. Joelle has the organizational instinct of someone who grew up in a house where things had to be managed, and she moved through the rooms with a systematic calm that made the size of the task feel manageable. She labeled every box in her neat handwriting. She wrapped the fragile things twice. She did not once say anything like, "Are you sure about this?" or "Have you thought about maybe talking to her first?" because she is the kind of friend who understands that when someone has reached the point of moving furniture, the talking has already happened. I packed the kitchen first. The copper kettle, wrapped in a dishcloth I would not miss. The cedar box of my grandmother Nana Bea's recipe cards, handwritten index cards in Nana Bea's slanted script, her handwriting a physical artifact of a woman I loved more simply than I have loved most people, which I carried the way you carry the things that have never asked anything of you, except to be kept safe. The mismatched mugs from a decade of thrift store Saturdays. The good knife set. The spice rack I had built myself in an afternoon with Nina watching from the counter, handing me screws. Then the living room. Then my bedroom. Joelle took the heavy things without being asked. We did not talk about my mother. We talked about Joelle's ongoing project of teaching herself to cook West African food from scratch, about a difficult patient case she had been carrying, about a movie she had seen alone on Wednesday and liked more than she expected. We talked the way friends talk when they are doing something hard together, and the talking is a way of holding the space, so the hard thing does not fill it entirely. I packed Nina's room last, and I packed it slowly. Her purple backpack was on the hook by her door, where she always left it after school. Her stuffed animals were arranged on the shelf in the precise order she maintained with a seriousness that I had always found quietly funny and entirely dear. Largest to smallest, no exceptions. The one exception being the small yellow rabbit that had to go between the bear and the elephant because that was where it lived and nowhere else. Her drawings were tacked to the corkboard above her desk. There was the drawing of our family, me, Eli, Nina, a figure labeled Dada in Atlanta, and a yellow dog we do not own but that Nina had been lobbying for steadily. There was a drawing she had made of the two of us at Folly Beach from the summer before the divorce, copied from the photograph on our living room wall, both of us squinting and mid-laugh. I sat on the edge of her bed for a moment before I started on the boxes. I thought about what my mother had said to her in that guest room. 9 Wednesdays. 9 times my daughter had packed her purple backpack and gone to a house where someone who loved her was quietly, persistently working to make her uncertain about me. I thought about how many more it would have taken if Nina hadn't been the kind of child who eventually just says the thing out loud. I packed her room. Every stuffed animal in a labeled box, in order, so she could restore the arrangement herself. Every drawing carefully rolled. The purple backpack I left on the hook. She would need it Monday morning. On Saturday evening, after Joelle had gone home and I had loaded the last of the non-essential boxes, I drove the 20-foot truck to the storage unit I had reserved the week before and spent 2 hours unloading the things that would wait there while I got the new apartment set up. It was 9:14 p.m. when I finished the last box. I pulled down the storage unit door and locked it and sat in the cab of the truck with the engine off. The facilities lot was lit by a single overhead fluorescent on a tall pole. There was a gas station across the street with a lit sign advertising lottery tickets and cold drinks. I could hear the highway a quarter-mile east, a steady low sound that does not change between day and night. The whole world outside that cab was just going on ordinary and indifferent, which was the right way for it to be. I was tired in the way that is past tired. The kind that happens when you have asked your body to carry what your mind could not hold alone. All the lifting and carrying and wrapping and stacking, all the physical translation of a decision that had been forming for months. My hands were sore. My back was sore. I was thirsty, and I had forgotten to bring water. I thought about Nina. I thought about the specific expression on her face on Tuesday morning, spoon halfway to her mouth, eyes careful and uncertain, her voice so careful and quiet asking if I loved her the way Grandma loved her. I thought about the 9 weeks of that. I thought about all the small disassembling my mother had done in that guest room, patient and warm and smiling, the way she did everything, and I thought about what I would now spend years gently, carefully undoing. Not by telling Nina what Grandma had said was wrong. Not by making her carry the verdict against her grandmother. By showing her, in the ordinary course of our daily life, in pancakes and school pickups and the spice rack we built together, what love that does not require her doubt looks like. I was not going to let my mother have another Wednesday with my daughter. Not from cruelty. Not from revenge. Because Nina was 8 years old, and she deserved to grow up with her sense of her mother's love as a fixed thing, not a variable, not a quantity that required comparison or periodic recalibration in someone else's guest room. I sat in that parking lot for 22 minutes. The clock on the dashboard read 9:36 when I started the truck. I drove back to the apartment to pack the final load. The move itself was finished by Sunday evening. The apartment was not bare. I had left the furniture that came with the place, the landlord's couch, the landlord's kitchen table. But everything that was ours was gone. Nina's drawings, the copper kettle, the framed photograph that I had taken myself of Camille and Nina at Folly Beach, the one where Nina is mid-laugh with sand on her chin and I am holding her hand and both of us are squinting into the light. Nana Bea's cedar box. I packed the last box into the truck at 6:52 Sunday evening. I went through the apartment once to make sure I had not missed anything. I had not. I sat down at the kitchen table, the landlord's table, with a piece of paper and a pen from my coat pocket, and I wrote out the forwarding address for the new apartment, which was 14 miles away in a quieter part of Charleston, closer to Nina's school, further from my mother. I wrote it in my regular handwriting. I put it in the center of the table where it would be the first thing anyone saw when they walked in. I left the keys on the counter beside it. The door locked behind me automatically. My mother, my son Eli, and my daughter Nina returned from the shore on Sunday night at 8:28. I know this because Joelle's cousin lives 2 streets from my old apartment and had agreed, without asking questions I did not want to answer, to send me a message when the car pulled up. The message came at 8:28. They're here.
I was in my new apartment by then.
Nina and Eli's rooms were not set up yet. That would take another 2 days, and Nina would sleep on an air mattress the first night, which she would find adventurous rather than difficult because Nina is the kind of child who can find adventure in almost anything, who can reframe an inconvenience into an event if the adult with her is calm about it. But the kitchen was functional, the copper kettle was on the stove, and the cedar box was on the shelf above my desk where it belonged. The framed photograph from Folly Beach was the first thing I had hung on any wall. It was the thing I had reached for before I had decided where anything else would go. I did not watch. I did not drive past. I did not have any way of knowing in real time what happened when my mother and my children walked through that door and found the apartment. What they found was this: the landlord's furniture, in its place, unchanged. The kitchen clean. The closets empty. Every surface clear. And in the center of the kitchen table, in my handwriting, the forwarding address on a piece of white paper, folded once. Beside it, the keys. She called me 14 times in the first 2 hours. I did not answer. She left 23 voicemails over the first 48 hours, in the particular escalating register of someone who started from confusion and moved through anger and arrived somewhere that sounded, in the transcripts I read, like bewilderment. I read the transcripts. I did not listen to the recordings. There is a difference between understanding what someone said and needing to hear them say it. She called my brother. She called my father, who told her he could not help with this. She called Aunt Cecile, who was the person I had called that week to give the new address to, because I trusted Cecile with it. Cecile told her she would not give her the address. The children came to me Monday morning, brought by the Garza family next door, with their overnight bags and Nina's purple backpack. Nina walked through the door of the new apartment, looked around and said, "Is this ours?" I said, "Yes." She said, "Do we have our stuff?" I said, "All of it." She nodded. She put her purple backpack on the hook by the door that I had installed Sunday night specifically for that purpose, at exactly her height. I had made pancakes. We ate them at the new kitchen table. Mine, not the landlord's, and I watched my children eat breakfast in a place that was ours, with morning light through windows facing a direction I had chosen, and I thought, this is what I needed 4 days for. The first week was the hardest, not because of my mother, but because of the children. Nina knew something significant had happened. She was 8 and she was perceptive, and she had spent 9 months being quietly shaped by a woman who used perceptiveness as a tool. So Nina had developed her own finely calibrated sense of when the air around her had changed. She did not ask directly about Grandma for the first 2 days. She was watching me, I think, checking the temperature of the new apartment, testing whether the air was safe. I caught her looking at me sideways at dinner, with a particular expression children make when they are gathering data. I met her eyes each time and held them steadily, and did not look away. On the third night, she came into my room at 10:15, after she was supposed to be asleep, and sat on the edge of my bed with her feet dangling and her arms crossed over her chest in the posture she uses when she is about to say something she has been rehearsing. She said, "Are we ever going to Grandma's again?" I had been thinking about how to answer that question since before I loaded the first box. Dr. Penn and I had talked about it twice in the previous month, once in a full session and once in a brief call I made standing in the clinic parking lot between patients, where I said, "How do I protect my daughter without making her carry my war?" What Dr. Penn had said was this: you tell her the truth at the level she can use.
Not the whole truth, not yet.
The truth she needs now is that her mother is safe, that she is loved, and that the adults in charge will not ask her to take sides or carry the weight of their conflict. So I sat beside Nina in the dark and I said, "Grandma and I need some time right now to work some things out between us. That's grown-up business and it belongs to us, not to you. It doesn't mean Grandma doesn't love you. It doesn't mean you did anything wrong. It just means right now we're in a different chapter." Nina was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Did Grandma do something bad?" I chose my words with care. I said, "Grandma did something that confused things between her and me, and I'm still understanding what I think about it. That's my job to figure out, not yours. Your job is just to be 8. She considered this with the seriousness she brings to most things. Then she said, "Okay." And she climbed off the bed and went back to her room, and I sat in the dark and felt the particular weight and lightness of being a parent, how the stakes are so enormous and the moments so ordinary. Children accept more than we expect them to when they feel that the adult in charge has a handle on things. Nina did not stop missing her grandmother. I did not expect her to. What I wanted was for her to stop watching me with that careful, uncertain attention. By the end of the first week, she had. 2 weeks after the move, Eli asked to invite his friend from preschool over. I said yes. The two of them spent 3 hours running between rooms playing a game whose rules I could not fully decode, but that involved a great deal of narration. The apartment was loud in the way apartments are loud when small children feel safe enough to be loud. I sat at the kitchen table with tea and a patient file and let the noise be exactly what it was. Some kindnesses are loans the lender forgets they're keeping. My mother's presence in my life had felt for years like a gift I had not fully earned and might lose if I did not keep performing the right gratitude. I understood now that this was not love. This was the shape fear makes when it dresses up as generosity. Aunt Cecile called me the following Wednesday. Cecile is 57 years old, and she tells you what she actually thinks, but she does it with her whole attention on the other person rather than on herself. She called from her home in Savannah and she asked how I was, and I told her honestly, and she listened the way she always listens. Then she said, I need to tell you something about your mama, and I want you to hear it not as a defense of what she did, because what she did was not defensible. I want you to hear it as context. I said, okay. She said, your mama has been afraid of being left her whole life. Your grandfather, our daddy, was a man who made you feel like your place in his regard had to be earned fresh every day. Your mama grew up never knowing if she was secure. The way she learned to protect herself was to make herself necessary, to make sure people needed her badly enough that they would not go. Cecile was quiet for a moment. When she felt you becoming more independent, when she could see you didn't need her the way you had after the divorce, she did what she has always done. She tried to create a need. She tried to make your children attached to her in a way that you couldn't compete with, so that you would always have a reason to keep her close. I sat with that. I thought about the devotion, the perfect grandmother performance, how it had felt like love, how it had been love, and how love organized around the lover's fear is still love and is still dangerous. I know, I said. I've known something was off for a while. I kept hoping I was reading it wrong. Cecile said, you weren't. But you're not cruel for doing what you did. Moving your children somewhere safe is a boundary. A serious one. But that's what it is. Your mama is going to have to decide what she's willing to do with that. I said, she left 23 voicemails. Cecile said, I know. She is frightened, Camille. Not that that excuses it. After we hung up, I sat at the kitchen table with the copper kettle going and held what Cecile had said carefully. I thought about my grandfather, whom I had met only a handful of times before he died, a distant man with a careful smile and no capacity for warmth that was not performed. I thought about what it must have been like to grow up waiting daily to be loved by someone who made you earn it. I thought about how a person carries that forward, how they go on making everyone around them earn it, because earned love is the only love they know how to trust. I understood my mother in that kitchen in a way I had not before. It did not change what I had done. Understanding is not the same as reunion. But it helped me hold the decision without needing to frame it as cruelty, which matters, because you cannot sustain a hard decision if you have to believe yourself to be a hard person to maintain it. My mother stopped calling after the first week. There was one handwritten letter, in her careful cursive, which arrived 12 days after the move. She had gotten the address from somewhere. I suspect the school. I opened it and read it once. It was 2 pages. It was not an apology. It said she loved her grandchildren. It said she had only been trying to tell them how much. It said she did not understand what she had done to deserve this. I folded it and put it in the cedar box, under Nana Bea's recipe cards. Not because I wanted to keep it close. Because I thought someday Nina might want to understand who her grandmother was, and I did not want to be the person who burned the evidence. I did not write back. Not yet. There was nothing I was ready to say that was both true and kind at the same time. Joelle came over the following Saturday with wine and planted herself on my new kitchen floor. She looked around and said, "This is a good place." I said, "It is." She said, "How are the kids?" I said, "Nina asked me yesterday if we could get a dog." Joelle laughed. She said, "That's a great sign." We sat on the kitchen floor for 2 hours and talked about other things, her brother's engagement, a new patient case, the restaurant we kept meaning to try near the new apartment. I did not talk about my mother the whole evening. That was its own kind of progress. There are things I want to tell you before I stop. I want to tell you that I do not know what happens next with my mother. I am not close to a future where something between us becomes real. I am close to a future where she has unsupervised access to my children's sense of themselves. Those are different doors. I want to tell you that the hardest part of what I did was not the packing. It was not the 4 days of labor or the $1,847 moving truck or the landlord's puzzled call. The hardest part was the moment Nina walked through the door of the new apartment and said, "Is this ours?" And I understood that what she was really asking was, "Are we safe? Are we staying? Can I put my backpack on the hook and trust it will be there when I come back?"
Yes, yes, yes.
I did not owe my mother my daughter's certainty.
I did not owe her my silence.
I did not owe her a goodbye. Some people only know how to love what they can control. My mother's love for Nina was real. I believe that. And it was shaped by fear into something that served her more than it served my child. And when love is shaped by fear into something that serves the lover more than the beloved, it stops being love in the functional sense. It becomes management. Love that requires your child to doubt her mother is not love. It is a claim. Family without respect becomes entitlement, and entitlement grows teeth the moment you build something it cannot control. I sat with Dr. Penn on a Thursday in October, and I said, I think I finally understand the difference between leaving and abandoning. Abandoning is when you go and take nothing. Leaving is when you go and take everything that matters. Forgiveness is not access. Understanding is not reunion. Compassion is not a key to my front door. I took my children. I took the cedar box with Nana Bea's recipes. I took the copper kettle and the framed photograph from Folly Beach. I left the forwarding address. Everything I need knows where I am. If someone has been using your children's love for you as a currency they spend on their own fear, I want to ask you something, gently. How long have you been watching it happen? And what would it mean for your children and for yourself to take them somewhere the currency doesn't spend?